Welcome to On Our Way, a podcast about grief and loss. Beryl Botman is my name. When dealing with the estate of a deceased beloved, you have to remember that you are doing this when you are at your most vulnerable. All you actually want to do is curl up and do nothing else but grieve. And remember also what your experience of estates might be. I am not a legal or financial expert. I'm speaking to you as a widow with limited experience of estate matters. That being the case, my involvement in winding up the estate is inescapable and very hands on. You are the contact for access to all documents and information the executor might need. Straight after the death, the necessary documents that for the burial and everything else that follows, I have already spoken about in a previous episode. But the identification document, the ID document, is very, very important, as well as the death certificate. And if you are married, the marriage certificate. And an important fact is you have to know where these documents are. Apart from the death certificate and the things needed for the funeral or whatever process you follow, also very soon after the death of your spouse, insurance claims can be lodged. These entail many forms that you have to complete, and you have to know what the contents of such policies are. You must know which policies you have, know the numbers of the policies, along with, of course, with which company those insurance policies are. In my experience, the broker would come to you and offer help, and it is wise to accept help, but also be aware that the broker might be interested in selling you new policies as well. So keep an open mind and don't make any decisions, especially not when you are in that state and that frame of mind. In the different policies, you should know also who the beneficiaries are so that you know who should expect what amounts of money. Now, the insurance policies pay out for outside of the estate, and they are paid even before the estate is wound up. And that is kind of money that you can use to tide you over while all the other money is tied up in winding up the estate. So be sure to claim it as soon as possible for your use. My experience further has taught me that you can't accept the company that you have your insurance with will automatically pay out the claim, or even if you have more than one policy with the same company, be sure that you tender all the different policy numbers, because they will only act on what you ask and they will only act on the numbers that you give them. If you should find out that there is a new number that you don't recognize when you are searching through documents and looking for other information, and you find that you have a different policy number, tender the claim as well. It's most likely to be a new policy and a new amount of money that's due to you. In episode 5, dealing with the employer, I spoke about the claims for funds that your spouse contributed to. I am not going to speak about that again. But what I do want to speak about is while you are around, while you are still together, you have to do estate planning. You must be prepared for the day that one of you are going to die first, but actually you are preparing for the death of both of you I'm now speaking in terms of a married couple. The process of planning for the management and transfer of your assets after your death, that is what estate planning is. The will is a very important step in this, a will and testament. And it is not like on television. It's not like TV where there's this grand and dramatic reading of the testament and everybody, the will, and everybody is there and there's drama. In most cases, for most people, as it was also for me, it was simple and it was not necessary for a public reading. If there is only one beneficiary, then only that beneficiary needs insight in the will. If there are no other beneficiaries, it is actually of nobody else's concern. Information about wills and testaments are quite easily accessible if you really give it a thought. We have had Free Will Month, I think, during the month of August. During that month, there is all kinds of advertisements and advice and reminders in public spaces, on radio, on television, newspapers, and online. Use the advice, listen to, consider them seriously, and act upon them. For drawing up a will, use professional services. Keep it simple. Remember and remind everybody else around you that a will is for after death, not before. Note who the beneficiaries in the will is. If there's any other specific stipulations regarding assets like cars and investments and savings, valuable items, the will has to be very clear. My opinion and reflecting on the simplicity of the will that my late husband and I set up, it really makes things very simple and straightforward. If there's nothing specific that is being stipulated. But if there are things that you have to stipulate, do that very clearly, and so that there's no arguments and fights about it. This will happen even if it's simple. So make it as simple as possible. Now, all of these thoughts are things that we have to actually think out about before we die. Another issue that you also have to be very clear about when drawing up your will is the appointment of executor or executors. It is wise, according to my opinion, to appoint an external executor who is knowledgeable and has experience of dealing with estates. That could be a lawyer, it could be a financial institution, but it has to be somebody whom you trust to be able to know what they are doing and how to do what they're doing. You can add an executor who is a family member. And I think in my case, my late husband and I, we were each other's executor along with the professional. So when he passed and I had to deal with his will, I was the executor along with the professional. It is very helpful because the external or professional executor needs to have somebody in the family to relate with and also to get all the information and documents. Although you have a professional executor, it still takes much work from you as the family member, as another executor, because you are the source of all the information. You are the one who will have to complete all forms, make applications, and all of that. So it is a lot of administration, but the key to all of this is somebody who knows what to do and when to do it and how to do it to guide you in the legal and financial fields where you might not be au fait with. That really helps. According to the will, the executor is appointed, then a letter of executorship has to be applied for from the master of the High Court. And this has to happen within 14 days. So you don't have lots of time to start procedures in terms of the will. In the case where an estate is, and that is the value of everything that the deceased owned, is less than 250,000 Rand, you don't need a letter of executorship, but a letter of authority. Ask questions. Know what these things mean. Ask the questions when you have the copy of your will and there's things in there, stated in there, that you don't understand. Make an effort and ask questions in order for you to understand. Know what the fees are. I listen to many people and they are very reluctant to pay anybody anything and would much rather try and do these things, executing the estate by themselves. My opinion is rather pay somebody some money to do a professional job. But you have to also know what the going rates are and what it is that the executor may bill you for, and what you should be able to identify if there's something in that bill that they give you that is not supposed to be there. Whatever the amount of the gross amount or the gross value of the assets, that's everything you own, what the amount is, the value thereof, altogether, the gross value, the executor is allowed to charge 3.5%, excluding VAT, plus 6% of all income into the estate during the admin period. Now, the admin period can vary from a couple of months to a year to 2 years, some even longer than that. Be aware of the charges for an executor and make that part of your planning, that you are going to have to pay the executor's fees. And the fees only become payable right at the end of the process when the estate has been wound up. Regarding banking, soon after your spouse passes, the bank closes the account, and so you can't do any transactions from there. What has to happen is that the executor has to open an account, what they call a late estate account. So the bank will open that account, and all monies that need to be paid or has to go through in or out of that of the estate of the deceased will have to be done through that. If the executor can't use any money in the late estate account, can only do that if there is a need, but with permission from the master. Know which accounts your spouse has, with which banks, what the numbers are, bank account numbers. It just makes things easier. You also have to have a very clear idea of who you owe money to and who owes you money, your debtors and your creditors. Now, this eventually there will have to be an advertisement which the executor takes responsibility in the press. Normally, according to my knowledge, on a Friday, you see in the classified section of a newspaper that there's a whole lot of a list of deceased estates advertised, saying that this person has died and who is the executor and who to contact in terms of money that the deceased owes you, or where you have to pay the deceased money that you owe them. So once all the information is gathered, there is this advert, and the advertisements are very public matters. Nothing is a secret. Everybody has access to a newspaper, and so they can see who needs to be contacted. Another important aspect of winding up a will is the issue of the South African Revenue Services. What you need to make sure that all your returns, your annual returns, are up to date. If you have to go and register the death of the deceased, and then the process starts with them, and they will let you know whether all the returns are up to date. If not, then you first have to get that up to date. Remember, I said soon after the death, the Human Resources Department at the place of employment will be able to help you with this. It is advisable that you contact with these people to help you understand what needs to be done, and then also advise you what to do when you go there. This is not the only administration that you have to do. You have to stop or transfer all accounts that's in that person's name. That if it's a TV license or any other subscriptions that the person had, to either transfer all these accounts or memberships or into the longest living or the beneficiary of the will, or you cancel. Not only is winding up of a will financially and legally draining, but also emotionally. How I felt during this period was it somehow feels like getting rid of your loved one, closing that person's life, removing all traces that he or she or they are there. It is closing chapters one after the other. How I reflect about this, looking back in the way in which I dealt with all of these financial and legal matters, and in particularly dealing with the will, I at that time decided to be very open and thought I share with the family. But openness can be either a blessing or a curse. And looking back, I think I shouldn't have shared as much and just do what I thought was necessary. It is already very difficult to wind up a estate, to close all the chapters, all the accounts in your spouse's name. So it is advisable that with all these things, you know what to expect. Because in any case, enough unexpected reactions and behaviors will surface for you to deal with. Don't relinquish your power. Don't relinquish your responsibilities. Do what you have to do when you have to do it, with the help and assistance from the best people with knowledge and experience. You've been listening to Estate Matters on my podcast, On Her Way with Beryl Botman. Walk tall, tell it all. You've been listening to On Her Way with Beryl Botman. You can purchase my books online on Amazon, Takealot, and at bookstores like Exclusive Books, Bargain Books, independent bookstores, and Barnes & Noble internationally. To connect with me, please follow me on Facebook to learn more about my book launches and talks. You can write to me at beryl.botman60@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.